picked the topic because I'd read most of it when it first came out. Like, I don't think I fully finished it, but like, I think I stopped when they got to James Dobson because I was so mad. If I'm being quite frank.
Yeah, there's like PTSD tied in just with that name.
For sure. I literally think that's what happened. But anyways, I got the point because I'd done, other learning and research on my own end at that point. But like, I, wanted to finish it. And I also, felt like it was yet again extremely relevant for conversation.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, my brain just thinks the Christian nationalism side of things. But then I'm realizing when I'm reading the either the preface or the introduction, and I'm like, oh yeah, gender, okay,
Yep.
okay,
Yep.
so okay, like my brain knows those things are connected, but like I was thinking we're gonna have a conversation, it's gonna kind of stay over in this pocket over here, but really that pocket is fed by the gender pocket so heavily, and I was just like, okay, all right. Which is interesting because then I think I sent you like the highlight clip of it, but then I went and I actually found the full sermon of that thing I sent you yesterday of this
Yeah.
preacher calling out the sin of sexism, and its effect, and I mean, he goes down the line,
Right.
and says what I mean. And I got so emotional because I realized, like, I've never heard a male, well, not even just a male, because the female pastors know they can't say that up there.
Right.
They know they can't even think about going there
Right.
because no one's going to listen to them and no one's going to care. And it's just going to be more trouble for them than it's worth. So they
Yeah.
can't say it. And the men generally, I mean, I'm not going to say that there's never been a man that I have heard myself personally from a Nazarene pulpit get up there and spend any amount of time like declaring that explicitly. Like, it might be a little tiny kernel baked in with a whole bunch of other stuff, but even then it's
Yeah.
like so tiny that you
Yeah.
almost miss it. And I was like emotional that like I didn't like, it was like my brain didn't realize like, hey, we could get up there and be talking about this. And then it realized how insane it was that at a church that loves, we love this phrase. We have always ordained women from the beginning. We love to say that. We love to.
Yeah, I got benched from preaching for over a year in Denver because I stood up in the pulpit and denounced John MacArthur's statement about how Beth Moore should just shut up and go home because there were financial givers in the church who loved John MacArthur and believed he could do no wrong.
Oh, we will bow to the dollar every day.
Yes, yes. So I literally was kept out of the pulpit for the better part of a year because of that. But when when it finally came to light and like somebody had asked a question like, hey, why has Mark not preached in a while, blah, blah, blah. And like I had been told what had happened and asked if I would like to have handled that situation differently. And I literally said no. Like that is still my response and that is still how I would, it got out and there was a letter that was written by a whole lot of women who were real mad with the senior pastor and let him know. So lo and behold, I preached within like 6 weeks. So it's just like, really, we're still doing this.
That's the 2020s. We're in the 2020s, and this
Yeah,
crap is happening.
that was in 2019, 2020. Yeah,
I was
right
gonna
around
say
there.
because you guys haven't been out much longer than that, so I figured it had to be somewhere in that
Yeah.
range. Like, so, I mean, that I have so many thoughts and feelings.
Trust me, I had a lot too, and I've
Oh, I'm
processed through all of
sure.
them. And
I'm
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
I
it
am.
was a dang good sermon too. That's the worst
I'm
part.
sure it was. I'm sure it was. One, I mean, love you even more now. Not that I didn't before, but there is something to putting your skin in the game.
Yeah.
Two, I'm like, what the frick are we doing?
What the frick, indeed, Lyndsey. There is unrelated, and this is why you and I should never do these, because we never actually will get anywhere. There is a fantastic,
gotten a lot of
I
places.
know. There's a fantastic study that actually looks into the language development of that, of frick, gosh,
Right.
dang it. Like, I mean, still to this day, maybe my favorite, like, ever language question was when my mom, when she was still working in a school, and several of her elementary school coworkers had a question about the usage of the word ass in the Bible. And I literally sat down for 40 minutes and did a 40-minute deep dive of a word study into ass. And I'm like, what other job do I get to do that? Like,
That's fair.
so I sent it all to my mom, and she was like, this is absurdly academic. And I'm like, you're welcome.
Listen, what did you ask for?
This is what you asked for. Like, literally.
You called.
Yeah. So they all sat around in the teacher's conference room afterwards and read my report.
About ass.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Highlight of my ministry right there.
That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
That's I would say one of the weirder things about my training was being graded on my personality. Essentially, it's not quite as fun as an ass report, but it is.
Hold on, I gotta go in and change the file name now.
I mean, what else would you call it?
Gonna put that on my desktop now. Anytime somebody walks by, they just see a file named ass report.
The ass files.
Oh gosh, this is why you and I shouldn't hang out.
Probably not. It's yeah. So
I'm just glad we're recording all of this.
Yeah, no, I just figured you know what? I figured the point of this is a little bit of behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And like, because we were talking about the fact that no one talks about anything. And so I felt like we can't be the only, like, I was like, all right, I'm feeling anxious about talking about this. I'm just going to talk about that. I'm just going to let's just start. Let's just do what we do and we'll see what happens. But yeah, no. So like, I was just like, we'll just talk about that and like start there, because we're talking about like, we're going to talk about Jesus and John Wayne, but like you and I spent like an hour talking about what we want these conversations to look like. At least, maybe more so what we didn't want them to look like.
Yeah.
I think because we're kind of okay with them looking like a lot of things, but a few things we didn't want them to look like. And that was like, because I think what I want to be clear about is I want to be a person that can understand why someone else would have another perspective. I want to be curious and not judgmental. I want to be empathetic from where they're sitting. Does that mean I'm okay with them staying where they're sitting if it is destructive to themselves and other people? No. But like, doesn't mean I can't understand how they would be there.
Right.
Like, because that, if I can't understand you and like see how you might be feeling, like we're never gonna like hear each other out. And you know, at least if what I hate is when people get frustrated with other people for being closed-minded and hateful, and then they become closed-minded and hateful about those people.
Yeah, I've had to just reality check myself on that a lot, especially since, I mean, really the last 9 years, since 2016, and just the culmination of so much of even what we're going to be talking about, and just seeing the perceptions of people that I looked up to and trusted and believed in, and then realized, oh, your perception and your perspective and your idea on all of this is completely different than what mine is. And yet somehow I still am grappling with, I think you're a good person, and trying to navigate, even though the things and the politics and the systems that you endorse are horrific and antithetical to the gospel of Jesus Christ. But now I'm just preaching. I don't know.
I said this about another very specific situation, but it's also very true generally. The instinct of self-preservation is very, 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 very strong. And what we don't realize is we are social creatures, and belonging is an essential part of our survival. So the potential to be on the outs with your community or group or be rejected is seen as physical danger to your like survival. Your brain interprets that interpersonal emotional pain the same way it interprets physical pain, which is mind-blowing, but it's true. So we're asking people, because there is such pressure to conform, and she talked about that even in the preface. I think she was saying it's not everyone, but the people that are still there that think differently feel such pressure to conform that they don't feel like they could stay and open their mouths.
Yeah, we're great.
It's fine. It's all fine, right?
It's fine. Yeah, fire on. Yeah, insert meme of the dog sitting at the high top. Yeah,
basically the dog on
this
fire.
is fine.
Yeah,
everything's on
it's
fire.
just totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't remember when I was rereading this first chapter. I didn't remember Billy Graham being like the linchpin here, but he kind of is.
So, okay, Billy Graham has always been announced as like the end all be all evangelical way to get people into church, things like that. And you're right. The author, like, to a point in which I was almost uncomfortable with the way that Billy Graham was being.
He was so deified growing up.
Yes.
Like, because he was such a good guy. He was so nice and so, like, you know, almost like the purist.
Yeah. And I'll admit, I don't know enough about Billy Graham behind the person.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is, you know, obviously very, very Hollywood-esque, you know, and the author talks about this, the way that he is lifted up kind of as this idol. Maybe that word choice might be a little too apt in this moment. But I mean, was lifted up in this way of, this is who we should be following. This is how we should do this, all of these things. And like, everyone in my life who speaks about Billy Graham only has positive things to say about him. Now, obviously, several years ago, there was this whole big thing that happened with the Billy Graham rule and all of that regarding men and women in a single place. And, you know, that's probably a conversation for a different day, because there's a whole lot of things that are just wrong with that whole mentality. But like, I have to be totally honest when I say I don't know how to feel about that part of the chapter, because I have only ever seen what would be perceived as the good things of Billy Graham. And again, there are issues.
Yeah.
But like, I was blown away to see the picture. I don't know if your copy of this particular book has any of the pictures in it, but there's an image of him at a Youth for Christ rally in 1947, and he's like, I need to go back and check his birthday, but he's like our age. He's young.
Yeah.
And I've never seen him look like that before.
Yeah, no, I've always seen him older.
So I was really kind of caught off guard, because I realized I've never done any research into Billy Graham before the 50s, like before his like tail end of the 50s into kind of his whole crusade.
Yeah.
You know, if I can call it that. Yeah, so I was again uncomfortable reading through this text, because I'm like, I want to approach this with an open mind, but I'm also like, I've never heard anyone almost vilify Billy Graham in this way.
Yeah, I mean, you could take it that way. I think there's a difference between people who use systems of power and they know they're using them to like keep people down, and then other people who think they are doing the right thing and truly believe that. And I believe that he had good intentions and that he cared for people from everything I've heard and seen. Versus like, there are some of these like more modern era mega pastors that have like risen to stardom level that, you know, they know at some point what they're doing when you hear about the way they're treating people. You know, like, they are power tripping and they're using it and they don't want you to check them, and that's totally different. But like, I think what threw me is like, because any variation from this like 1950s era thought of Christianity or version of it kind of like was always seen as like new and progressive and therefore can't be trusted. Like, the fact that she's saying alongside the timeline of Billy Graham, there were people who were also thinking, actually, we don't have to have uneven relationships between men and women because Christ's atonement, took away the curse and we can all be equals now. I was like, what? There were people thinking that back then? And why are we still having these ridiculous
Right.
conversations? Like, because it's absolutely crazy to me that, like, I don't know, it's just, and I know it's like, I think the thing too that a lot of people have done more historically and still do sometimes is this idea of like conviction and like sometimes your brain is just used to patterns and things make you uncomfortable or new things are scary. It doesn't mean they're wrong.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
means your brain isn't used to it yet. But I remember being raised at like that discomfort you would feel when you were around certain people or certain situations was conviction, and it was discomfort because I now know what, like, for lack of a better phrase, righteous indignation feels like. I know what that feels like, and it does not feel the same as me feeling weird and out of place.
Right. Yeah. I think there's a lot of changes and shifts that we've experienced within, and I've said this before, in our language and the way that we speak about these things. And I was, to your point of, this egalitarian idea. So the concept of men and women being able to be equal within social standings, within family standings, those kinds of things, which, like, by and large, officially, the circles that I am involved in would say that is our stance. Now, is the practice always then meeting what we say? No. And we all know that. And I think we would be foolish to say otherwise. But I had to chuckle a little bit when I was reading through this and seeing, much of the history and the study that I have done, in which that concept and that idea back then, I mean, we're looking, doing math and I hate it, but it's, 75 years ago, we're hearing that this was a liberal theology. And I have to laugh because even the very definition of liberal theology, people that you would consider liberal today in the academic world or in the way that we would even structure the word liberal, you're nowhere near it. You have to deny all of these things that honestly, at the end of the day, would probably mean that you're not even a Christian. And that's not my place to say whether or not you are, yada, 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 all that stuff. But purely from an outsider's perspective, to hold a liberal theology just means that you're discounting. And actually, I think she talks about it, the four distinctives that are required to become evangelical.
Yeah.
It's really funny because it's not an evangelical only thing. There's many denominations, many practices, many institutions that use those four pillars. The idea of the supremacy of Scripture. Was Jesus someone who truly came and died? And the atonement systems that are in with that. You have to believe in a conversion experience, and then go out and change the world. Like that's it. If really, truly, even today, to be called a liberal theologian would mean that you would basically say, I don't believe in XYZ. Usually those things are the creeds, the things that have been agreed upon for the church for the better part of 1,500 plus years. And so I was really like, I was laughing to see these ideas being labeled as liberal when I'm just like, this, like, it's the meme. You keep using that word. I don't think you know what that word actually is.
No, but seriously.
And that is so prevalent within this conversation with, and what we're trying to talk about in this, and this is the helpful reminder to me in what we're having these conversations for, is that, this isn't true. There are truths, there are things that we have been told, there are things that we have been taught, there are things that we have experienced. And the good news for me today is that, yes, even though we have distorted so many things, we still have an opportunity to make those things right. And this idea of liberalism, this idea of egalitarianism, whatever you want to throw at it, the fact that these are the things that we're fighting over. And I literally put in my notes, definitions of liberal theology have led us to completely irrelevant conversations. And it's just our inability to understand what actually needs to be spoken of and to, in a sense, lay down the gauntlet and the hammer or whatever, insert your tool of choice here. It's prevented us from actually understanding what it means to do what we are doing.
I had a thought while you were talking about all of that, of this, like, yeah, we're spending so, I mean, the amount of energy spent to maintain that, to keep those standards in place, to keep people in their quote place, genders in their quote place. That's a lot of energy. And usually people only expend that much energy when they're like afraid of something. We must be really freaking scary.
So, well, I
Like
mean, you talk to 12-year-old me, and yeah, I was terrified of girls. So, you know,
I mean, yeah, but honestly, like, maybe they're not wrong. Not saying that we would do bad things. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. But yeah, like in a way that, like, I guess my brain is taking it this way, in a way that an insecure leader is afraid of a person who has charismatic natural leadership in their ranks. You know what I mean? Like, that's, I think, what it feels like sometimes. And like, but I'm also like, would we be this way if you guys hadn't been doing this? If you oppressor people out there who are probably totally listening to this,
you know who you are.
if you patriarchal folks had not pressed this on us for so long, had not tried to cage us, whatever, hamper us, however, would we even be this? You know what I mean? Like, are we naturally this way, or have we become this way as a reaction to the lack of willingness to engage in egalitarianism? Could we be more truly egalitarian had we leaned into that theology way earlier in our societal existence? Or is it now that, like, half of us are so used to fighting that in some ways it feels like, not, I'm not saying completely, but I'm saying, like, I do think there is a strength that comes with having to fight your way up from the bottom in a lot of situations that is not needed. So why would it develop in other situations?
Yeah. And I think it goes even beyond, you know, not just the issues of sexism. I mean, again, there's a lot of isms we can put in there. You know, there's a note that the author makes, though, of this idea of all of these things are only a problem because they are perceived as a threat. And it's now, is that a threat to power? Is that a threat to status? Is that a threat to even just consistency in life? Whatever that might be. There is the evangelical militancy requires an ever constant threat.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, it's been very easy for us to find certain things and perceive those things as threats. And so, you know, you're absolutely right. If we had taken the time to sit down and have these conversations, and there are folks who did and have, because let's be honest, I don't think we would be here having this conversation today
for sure,
if they
if
hadn't.
someone isn't out there trying this whole time.
Right. So what really I think is jarring out of all of this is that it's almost been a cyclical process, in that here we are X number of years later and we're still having the same conversations. We're still having the same issues. It's through, you know, I'm sure my notes probably look very different than yours just because of my background and where I've come from and my understanding of the history of the church. But like, I'm reading through this and it was a nightmare trying to take notes because I've got my regular notebook and I'm writing in the book. Like, it's just, I'm all over the place in the best possible way. But the whole time I'm just seeing this, I'm like, it's happening now. Like, every time I'm seeing it's like, oh, this was happening in the 50s. Wait, I can pinpoint as something I literally saw last week where this is happening again. And it is such a, you know, you bring up this idea of, you know, is it even necessary? Is it necessary to fight? Is it necessary to do these things? I think that's really a two-sided question, because my first answer is absolutely. You better believe that we are going to stand here, and fight might be the wrong word, but we are going to stand here and we are going to stand for the truth that we have been given, and standing up for those who need to be stood up for.
Yeah. I think there's a difference between picking a fight, though, which is
Right.
what it feels like in this context when you're talking about there's always an enemy, there's always a threat.
You say that, and then immediately thinking of, again, this idea of this militancy always needs a threat. And I think it was within the intro that this gets spoken about, but then you see it all throughout the first chapter of Jesus and John Wayne as well. This idea of, okay, what is the next threat? And there were a lot of cases that there were legitimate wars, that there were actual wars going on, that was then being used to basically show this masculinity of who we are as an American people, and how that was tied into Christian, or my favorite phrase of all time, family values. Nobody knows what that actually means.
No.
Nobody knows what family values actually are.
But
they have a perception of what it is.
Yeah.
And it's if we are not sending them off to war, let's make sure we're at least making money off of them. If we are sending them off to war, let's make sure it's a war where we're going to profit. And when I say we, that's not just in financial systems. That's in and again, the church was wrapped up into this, and the author talks about this. The church was brought into these systems and these cultures and these ways of nationality. Let's just call it what it is, nationalism. That's a dirty word in some evangelical circles, but this idea of nationalism, it was a symbiotic relationship. The nation benefited from it, the church benefited from it, and so they wanted to make sure that this was consistently happening. So when there wasn't a war to be fought, who's the bad guy? Well, it's that guy across the line who's trying to sack your quarterback. Are they the same things? No. But is the perception, is the goal, is the system that is being exploited the same? I'd at least say it's within a similar vein. There are people who regularly look at scripture and use scripture in order to just belittle, just demonize entire groups of people.
Yeah, for sure.
Both by what they look like, what gender, what, again, insert XYZ here.
Yeah.
There are people who have done that. And I hate that those are the people who receive the airtime, because in the same way that we see these, and it's easy to be anti this, anti that. It's easy to say, that's not who we are. One of the comments that I've always heard that has always really stood out to me is, I never want to be known as a Christian because of what I stand against.
Yes.
And instead, it's I want to be known as a Christian. I want people to understand who I am by what I believe in. And that is a God of love. That is a God of compassion, a God that still calls us to repentance and us acknowledging that, hey, guess what? We're not perfect.
Yep.
But still is inviting us into that relationship.
No, and I think, this idea of constantly needing to fight brings me back to that statement I said earlier about the tension of living in constant anxiety that I felt when I believed that I was a piece of crap, because I was always having to prove that I was worth keeping in the room. And that, I guess what I'm saying is the need to constantly prove something is missing the point of inherent worthiness and love, because we have to be pushing back, we have to be proving that we're holy enough, that we're better than something, we're more this than something. We have to be always doing that, because we can't just accept that we are God's children and we are loved and we are flawed, but as long as we are trying to do better every day, that's enough. We're not going to get it right every time, but that anxiety, it's an insecure response to constantly be having to battle to prove that something, when if you were to just realize, hey, he finished it, it's, and to be honest, a lot of people, this whole idea of when I thought as a child, yeah, when you're a kid, you literally, your brain needs to learn these patterns and things fit in these boxes and this means that, and your brain has to develop in that way so that it can learn deviation and nuance down the road. But like, you're supposed to learn deviation and nuance down the road. Like,
Right.
that is your fully developed brain. But this idea that we stay stuck in this like childish this or that kind of thinking is not, or just that we stay stuck in any kind of thinking that there can't be new information introduced to the equation, is just completely insane to me. Because we don't do that with any, we would never want anyone to do that with like learning new medical treatments for anything. Like, we would never say that about scientific advancements or anything of that nature. So why are we so sure that we got it right so far back then and that we can't, like, that is proclaiming our own omniscience and that there can't be anything new to learn. There can't be anything new to discover out there. And like, it's that whole like idea of that. And, you know, we all like at some point, I feel like have to, it's a process to get to the point where you can be comfortable with gray and not knowing things. And to like know that it's okay to not know things. And like, and it also is a process to get to the point where you can have a thought that not everybody in the pew row next to you is having, because of that perspective of my belonging to the group depends on me thinking like the group, and me belonging to the group is essential to my survival. So it took a lot because there's so much silencing and it's so frustrating. I think that's where I'm at with all of this, is like, you know, you even talked earlier about people keep saying it's not just like ideologically either. It's like educationally, like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
people are saying things like, even in that clip I sent you, he gets on a tangent at a certain point where he says, you know, whenever we start talking about the gospel going horizontally, they don't have a theological rebuttal. They start throwing sociological terms at us and they say that it's Marxist. And he said, we didn't read Karl Marx, we read our Bibles.
Right.
And he said, also Marxist, define it. Define it. And he says, I'm not going to mess with you if you can't define it. You're just saying a bunch of stuff you heard someone else say. And that is how it feels a lot of the time, because I do feel like there's this idea that those of us who think differently than we were raised have just like lost the discipline. We just don't want to do the hard things or do devotions. If we did, we would be realizing, like, I don't know if they know. I think about this all day, every day. Like, I'm constantly reading stuff about this. I'm constantly reading, like, you know, word studies or whatever you want to go into it. I'm constantly doing research on biblical interpretation and like, and it's kind of painful that like the people who raised us to care and be kind and love other people more than you love yourselves and take care of the poor. It's really frustrating to me that when I repeat what I was told, I am othered.
Yes. Yep. So much of American Christianity has relied on the subjugation of other. And I've preached on this before. I've talked on this before. And truly, if we are to take, you know, I laughed when the author talked about the fundamentalist perspective. And like, I could do a whole podcast just on fundamentalism, particularly within our denomination, our history, our structures, and the wider perspective of that. So that's a podcast for another day. But the idea of a plain reading of scripture always makes me laugh for a multitude of reasons. But one of the things that, you know, when we're talking about the subjugation of other, if we had a plain reading of scripture and an understanding of what truly was going on and the atonement of Christ, we would never even have the word other in our vernacular. We would not ever label someone as other. We would be physically incapable of doing so, because it becomes an us versus them mentality the second that we use the term other. And we've lost the plot at that point. There's just listening to you talk for the last couple of minutes. I'm kind of reflecting on a few things, and one thing that I have often had in conversations regarding some of these things is there's a party of persons who would hear things like this and would immediately say, "Well, that's not me. That's not my church. That's not my friends group. That's not my faith." And I think for the most part, a lot of them would be telling the truth in that, and I think that's a good and valid thing. However, I think it's also very important for us to have these conversations and for others to realize, see, I did it. I used the word other. For others to realize that these systems are present, that they have been consistent, that they have not always looked the same, but they have shifted a little bit over time, but their end goal has always been the same. There was a part of my notes, I literally wrote down, you can't call crap something different and expect its nature to change. And that's where we're at with a lot of that.
Yeah.
I think there are the conversation that you and I want to have, and whether this becomes a conversation with more than just us, amongst many others, who knows? I think you and I both are setting out with this kind of waiting for that answer to come up, but in the meantime we knew that we just had to have a conversation. There will be people who hear this and are so put off by it because they're like, well, that's not true, none of that's true. I would encourage those folks to pause and listen. There are people who are hearing this conversation and they're like, absolutely, and hallelujah, praise Jesus, where has this been my whole life? And I think out of those camps, out of those parties, where I kind of have landed in the middle of all of these conversations, and this was a question you had posed to me not too long ago about, why are we doing this? I've come to realize that I can't be upset with people who don't necessarily think in the same way that I do, but particularly those that embody the very spirit of what we've read just in the first chapter of Jesus and John Wayne. People who have been a part of these systems, people who have been a part of what you and I and many others would consider just to be not Christ-like in a whole lot of ways. Because I'm realizing more and more, the further I've gone into ministry, and I'm over a decade now into my ministry, the further I've gone, the more I've realized that people have just never been given the tools, the resources, the knowledge to be able to think through these things for themselves.
Or the responsibility.
Correct. By and large, and again, I know I'm painting with a broad brush here, so I'm not saying this is 100% true, but what I have witnessed and what I have seen is the individuals then who are withholding that information, who are withholding those systems, who are withholding those tools and those resources and the ability to just sit and ask a question, are the ones in power, are the ones that have benefited from historically white evangelicalism and are willing to hold on to that power. And again, we've seen that throughout, at least within American Christianity, how just distinct of a movement that has become.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not even, it's not even the phrase "I'm not mad, I'm disappointed." Like, it's not even that anymore.
No.
It's almost a realization of, I look at friends of mine and folks that you and I both know that we went to college with who post certain things on their social media pages, and I'm just like, good Lord, how in the world, why are they even blah, 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 all this stuff. And then I sit there and I realize, oh, right, they didn't receive the same education that I did. They haven't had the same experiences that I have. They haven't been sent through, 9 years of a bachelor's and a master's plus 12 years as a pastor, and so I can't fault them for that. I can't be mad at them for that. I can be frustrated. I can be annoyed. I can be, if anything, if I am going to get mad, you talked about righteous indignation. If I am going to be mad, if I am going to be upset, it should be at the systems that prevented them from ever being able to have these conversations or thoughts in their own head on their own time. And that's why I want to have this conversation, is the recognition that our people deserve better. The systems of, and again, broad brush, but the systems of white evangelicalism have faulted our people to a point in which we have designated so many others as other, and it's just antithetical to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And now I really am preaching, but like, this is why I think I'm so passionate about these things. I know this is why I'm this passionate about these things, is because I was raised and I was taught that the church could be a place in which we all could come together and we all could experience something transformational, and our lives would be better because of it. And yet time and time again, we have seen these systems prevent people from coming in through those doors and experiencing these things that we have promised for generations, for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I'm just sick and tired of it. And I am ready for the church to put its money where its mouth is. When the church is responsible for sending people to therapy, we've clearly gotten something wrong.
That's mostly what I talk about in therapy, if I'm completely honest.
But I mean, in all seriousness,
no,
like
you're
this,
not wrong. You're absolutely correct. It's yeah, and I think that's why I feel like I never want to make noise for the sake of noise. And I'm new to the idea that my voice is worth using. New to it. I think I believe it, but most days I believe it. But, you know, if anything I can say can help someone else feel less alone or more empowered to speak, and they can have effects in their community and to their people, or they can feel like it's okay to think differently, or it's okay to freaking think. Let's just stop there. It's okay to think. It's okay to question.
yeah,
It's okay to have a strong opinion. It's okay to speak up. It's okay to ask why. It's okay to say, I'm not fine with this treatment. Like, it's okay to stand up for yourself and other people, and it's also okay if a system is killing you faster than you can impact it. It's okay to leave.
yeah, and it's okay to. This was one thing I again was thinking about when you were speaking earlier. It's okay to be a part of a system that does have a troubled past and a troubled history, as long as you don't remain complacent. And after having been notified or given the tools to realize it's an issue. And I think that's where I find myself currently.
Are you saying with great power comes great responsibility?
I am in fact Spider-Man. So the secret is out. I am Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But, within our denomination, and I say our denomination, the one that I am ordained in, well, the one that I am ordained in, the one that I, have devoted much of my life to, it's not perfect. It has its issues. And boy, howdy, do I resonate with the book Jesus and John Wayne. I can't believe I just said boy, howdy before that phrase, but
sure did.
Here we are.
I'm not cutting that for anything.
No, and I would be upset if you did.
In, if anything else.
Right. But, we were, and I say we, our denomination was the second largest voting block of denominations who identify as evangelical in the 2016 election.
God help me. I didn't know that. I didn't know that, Marcus.
The only other religious organization that was above us is the Mormons. And so I am 100.
Baptists?
Yes.
I'm just going to call it. We beat the Baptists?
We finally won at something.
I didn't want to win. I didn't need to win.
And again, this is, probably a conversation for a different, and even this conversation will put certain people off, and that's okay. But recognizing that I have been a part of that institution, I've been a part of that structure, and I am trying to remain as faithful as I can from within that structure, because there is still good to be had in these structures. There are still generations that are going to follow me and follow others who will be born into these structures. And I want them to have just as much an opportunity to have these conversations as you and I do.
Yeah. I think that's important. And I think, to clarify also, it is only in the last 3 years that anything on my resume does not have the word Nazarene on it. For the record.
Good for you.
So it's only since like the tail end of 2022 that I have had anything on my resume really that there's a year that doesn't contain Nazarene.
Sure. Sure.
It was school. It was my husband's job. It was his other job. It was my job. And And it is because of what they told me we were about that I am this.
Yeah.
So, like the fact that I went to a college where I walked into the psych department and I wasn't sure if I was going to stay a psych major, but they said all truth is God's truth. And I said, yep, let's go.
Yep.
So, and it was the best degree I could have chosen for me because there were people willing to hold faith and science and knowledge and say, what, it doesn't have to conflict. So what's it telling us? It's not negating it. So what new information, what new theology can we take out of this new understanding we have of how our brains work?
Yeah.
Like, and, professors that traveled everywhere and saw all these different people and weren't othering those people, but were saying they just do it differently here.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that they're, and that created such a more broader possibility of human experience for the Christian experience.
Yeah.
And, I was I'm not going to pretend that I was some like closet little liberal when I was a kid. I had questions, but like I was just trying to follow the rules and do, like what I was told. And I will admit, I never was like one that I was like my parents in that I would not be like in your face telling you what's wrong about you. Like I was never that kind of a person, but I thought the things, and like I believed what I was told to some extent. And it's like, I think, let me see if I could find it because I'm going to misstate it. And the way I said it was like exactly how I want to say it right now. So, okay, that's the word I needed to look up. That's the word. I wrote this piece about like my decision to, and I'm still finding my new faith community, but like for me personally, there just was too many things and like systems that were, I mean, we're different, obviously, like we have different personalities and we have different genders and, and different situations within those structures. And me being the personality I have with the gender I have was not a fun time once I realized what was going on. And
are you saying I have an innate, an innate one up on you by being a white evangelical straight male?
I'm saying there's a reason we call it privilege, Mark. There's a reason we call it privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying nothing else other than sometimes there's less friction for certain people in certain scenarios, and that was not a frictionless situation for me. It was sandpaper on sandpaper.
Oh,
so,
that gave me the willies.
Yeah,
I don't like thinking about that.
It absolutely should. But like, it took me, because I was that good kid, like it took me a while to realize that I was. And I guess I'm saying this not to say that anyone has to think the way I think, but that more so if you do, or if you are thinking just not the way everyone around you thinks, that's okay. Because it doesn't mean, because I think some people think like, well, if I start to think that, then I have to throw everything out. And that's not true.
Right.
Like, I personally feel like I have a bigger, more inclusive understanding of where God's love resides and how it works in the world than I did before I decided it was okay to think differently than the people sitting next to me. Because of that, like, idea of there always being a threat, and you know what I mean? Like, we had to always be fighting for being so good. And the thing I was trying to find was this piece I wrote, and like, there's like innocence, but there's also naivety. There's just naivety. And like, and the part where I said I was always trying to do the best and I've always been me. I've always had this personality. I've been pretty passionate. And so, I had what I said was, a bold heart was bolstered by good intentions, but lacked compassion for interruptions and the interrupted. She was good, but no one else was ever going to be good enough. And she bought the lie that never crying made you tough. But when I learned to love better, I did so. And just that idea that it's okay if you used to think one way and you think another way. You're doing the best you can with what you have when you have it. Like, don't like let it eat you that you didn't always know the truth. Like, be proud of yourself that you were able to grow and learn something new. Like, but also, like, don't be like, kind of expect people to have a problem with it, maybe. Like, and because maybe if you do, then like, then it won't feel like if you expect that, if you just know that kind of comes with the territory, then you won't like question yourself maybe so much, and you can just let yourself be. Because like, I mean, the other part of that piece is like, I really felt finally free to be who I am in a way that was like empowered to be the way I was created. And I said, it's funny how a heart can finally find its true north, and instead of warm applause, gets a course corrective storm. What's so brave inside of you terrifies me. If you're so free to be you, who the hell does that make me? Like, and I think it's just back to that idea of, we were talking about insecurity earlier. When there's people that cling really, really tightly and are inflexible, it's an insecurity thing. And like, don't be surprised when you get more comfortable and more flexible with yourself and with what love is. Like, if other people get really nervous.
Yeah.
Because they aren't where you are, and they don't have that flexibility of thought, and your existence in their proximity is potentially nudging that bottom Jenga brick on their, which is my favorite analogy, but because it feels the most correct, the bottom Jenga brick of their worldview. And a lot of them have put everything in that tower.
Yep.
Everything.
Yeah.
So it's okay. We're all just trying, and we're going to keep trying, and we're going to keep talking about this book that's going to trouble us a lot. But yeah, that's all I got. You got anything else?
Yeah, no, I'm just sitting here thinking about, what this journey might entail and what it's going to look
Yeah.
like. And, this is I think there will be moments in our conversations where your experience and my experience shine through a little bit, and our frustrations that we've had with the church, with systems, with friends, with people, with family. I think those things will come through. And so we're going to try our hardest to remain as controlled as possible, maybe is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
But also recognize that it's a part of our story and it's a part of our narrative.
Yeah.
And I laughed when you said earlier, I am who I am because of these things. And I kind of wanted to just jokingly say to the people who are so adamantly opposed to some of these thoughts, it's your fault. Like, we're the way that we are because of you.
For sure.
And I say that,
No, it's very
I
true in both ways.
yeah, and I do
I'm
say that.
happy with the way I am. If
Right,
you're not,
right.
that's kind of on you because you did
Yeah.
this. So
Yeah.
like,
I jokingly say that, but I also, I do say, thank you. It's just the perception of who I am, and what I have had to work through and journey through. And also, again, and you said it, and I made a joke about it, but I also am very astutely aware that my systems and structures have allowed me to be successful because of who I am and what I look like and what I talk like and my gender. And I, in recognizing that, I want that privilege to be made known, and for people to recognize that that still exists even in 2025 when we are recording this episode.
yeah.
And that is the desire of why I want to be better, is because it shouldn't just be people like me speaking out and having a voice, and on both sides of any conversation. But yeah, Jesus and John Wayne, it's
gonna be a ride.
it's going to be a ride, that's for sure. I think some people are going to appreciate the conversation. I think there's some people who it might take 20, 25 years for them to be able to hear these things and these conversations and come to terms with some stuff.
And
Yeah,
some people
yeah,
never will.
yeah. And that's, for me, that's okay, because it's out there. And that's why you and I think we both agreed, that's why we want to have these conversations. So
Yep. Cool.